But you're also not a stranger to Chautauqua County. Kind of give us a little background of how you got to know a little bit about Chautauqua.
Okay, my first memory of Chautauqua was probably 12, 14 years ago when I was with a group called the Capitol Steps, and we came to Chautauqua Institution Amphitheater and played there. And I remember being very impressed with the facility and the people and the gingerbread houses and the whole scene, as everyone is. And we had a great time. So during the pandemic, my wife Cecilia and I were looking for a place to get out of DC and maybe rent a room or half of a house somewhere on a lake. I remember this place, I said, that we used to perform. And I think the last time we performed there with the Steps was 2018. And I think that's right. So anyway, so we rented a house, and it just happened to be right next to our now dear friends, Stephen Stout and Kendall Crowley, is right next door.
Yeah.
And guess who was staying with them that week? Mark and Allie Russell.
Oh my God.
Because Mark and Allie had leased their house out in Chautauqua Shores and to some people from Canada, and those people couldn't get back because of the pandemic. So they said, go ahead, stay in the house, and they stayed with Stephen and Kendall. And I met Stephen, and I made the mortal sin of calling him Steve, and he corrected me very quickly. It's Stephen with a PH, and he said, I think there's someone you want to meet in here. Once he learned I was with the Capitol Steps, and there was Mark. So Mark and I started up a friendship, and Allie, and of course we lost Mark, and Allie is still a really dear friend, and as are Stephen and Kendall. So that's how we began our adventure here, and then we ended up falling in love with the place and buying a place in Bemis.
So you mentioned Mark Russell, who I actually spent 6 hours with and interviewed him over various times over the years. But Mark's role is sort of comedic satirist, and he did something, and it was the Shoreham Forever in Washington. And I always had the impression that the Capitol Steps, who similarly satirists, timely news satirists, sort of have maybe a legacy connect with Mark. Did you ever sense that?
I think so. You know, we weren't directly connected, but I think sometime I was in the Capitol Steps from '97 until 2021, so 24 years when we went out of business for the pandemic. And I think before my time, there was a point where we connected with Mark, and we actually worked with him on some gig, some show somewhere, but it wasn't in my purview. It wasn't in my timeline. And he knew Elena Newport, who's the head of Capitol Steps, and it's no longer, it's no longer a viable show, but she was that from the very beginning, and along with Bill Strauss. And so he knows her, and he and I would have conversations about how we connected and didn't connect and so forth.
Capitol Steps. I love that. We will get back to the beginning. In the beginning, there was Michael R. Thornton, but we'll get clear. But I'm always curious because I was a big fan. I'd go to Washington. We'd watch you guys. Never appreciating that I'd be with one of them. But how did it work? Did you come to them originally as a writer or did a performer? How did it work?
Good question, and a lot of people wonder about that because it started as staffers. A lot of people who know the Capitol Steps, follow us, knew that the original group of them were staffers in a Senate office, and so there was a sense of always coming from the Capitol, directly from the Capitol. So there was a sense of amateur kind of becoming pros, because they're very, very just really witty and great. And Bill and Elena just wrote some great parodies. So that's how it started. When I was in D.C., I was an actor. I had been in New York City for 14 years acting and touring around the country, and moved to D.C. I was in a show at the Kennedy Center called the Sheer Madness, which is, I think, America's longest running, whatever it is, play. And I was in there for a couple of years. I remember seeing my wife saying, there's this audition which they hardly ever had, for Capitol Steps. I had not even heard of them. And what are they? She said, well, they're this and that. And I said, okay. So I went and auditioned. I had no idea that it was basically a career move, because once I joined, I got in, and once I joined, that was it. You know, that was my full-time job. We toured around the country, and we had ups and down times. We had up and down seasons, but it was basically a steady full-time job. So I came to it as a professional actor, and then producer. I also produced the show around the country once they learned I could do that. So,
Did you write, or was that written elsewhere?
it was always written by Mark Eaton, Elena Newport, and Bill Strauss, with a couple of exceptions from cast members. Mike Tilford did some writing, but I was not a writer. It was mainly Bill and Elena were the the patent holders of the show.
Yeah.
Whatever came into them, it was theirs. But they did the lion's share of the writing, most of the writing.
It's because of the timeliness of it all. I mean, you couldn't have sort of last year's news, that was fish wrap, because did you have to, again, did Bill and Elena, you're on the road and you got a whole staging, and all of a sudden did they come with, all right, we're going to insert this new stuff and you got to rehearse it, and did that happen while you were touring?
Yeah, it was. Luckily, there wasn't a lot of staging. It was very much plant and sing.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of movement, and we would throw that together on the fly. But our rule was if it was over rehearsed, then we would we'd peak too soon. That was our joke.
Yeah.
So we might get a new song, originally fax, right, pre-internet. And then we had cell phones, eventually, and then it was internet, and then it was an email, and maybe printing out the song and learning it that day in California, wherever we were flying to, and the trick is the songs would be something that is already known.
Sure.
So if it's George W. Bush and it's don't go faking you're smart, I couldn't if I tried, kind of thing. It's easy to do something, and that's an example I use. It's so simplified, but it was easy to learn because of that. And sometimes they'd be songs like "How Do We Solve a Problem of Maria" from Sound of Music. It would be Scalia, or it would be whatever, right? And we could use that, or Supercala. We would use. I'm not very good at remembering the old lyrics, but we're the super democratic people who so we put something that was witty into that long supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So that would be fun, and we'd give a little piece to each person, so we didn't have to memorize a lot if it's the same night, and we just put it up, and that was really neat that we did it that way, and that made it fun.
The Capitol Steps consisted of how many? What's a troupe?
The troupe would be 3 guys, 2 women, and a piano player, and then 1 tech guy on the road. So we'd have 6 big black duffel bags with all our cheap wigs and props and signs, and it was meant to look like a ma and pa, even when it was a very successful group. And we kept that up. The duct tape mustaches, we'd cut them the backstage, and it was very, even off Broadway. When we were doing off Broadway shows, I had this stupid wig for, who was it? Who's the guy that always held the pencil and talked to himself in the first person, ran for president? So I got spoke like that. What's his name? I can't remember the name. Anyway, I remember having this really lousy wig on and getting picked up in a black limousine and going to NBC and having to do this morning show, and just thinking, I look like an idiot, but this is what the gag was. So I don't remember what your question was, but it had something to do.
No, we're just curiosity. You come in, and you did theaters from probably this size here, which is 200 seats, to 4,000, which is Chautauqua.
Yeah.
I mean, you were huge hits at Chautauqua.
Yeah, it was. It was. I always say to people that it was bigger in the Washington, on the other side of the country, than it was in D.C.
Yeah.
Wherever NPR or public radio, as we generally often say NPR, but public radio as a whole, we had 4 shows a year at the time, and that's how we got our, sort of like the Car Talk guys and Garrison Keillor. That's how we got our free marketing.
Yeah.
By doing these shows. So we had audiences all over. And so in Seattle, Washington, at the Warner or whatever it was, 3,000 people packed the place. In D.C., we might be in the Chelsea's restaurant and we get 200 or 300 people a night because we're there every weekend. And people knew us and we're always there. We're just we're a piece of the furniture in D.C. Out west, it might be thousands of people. So it all depends on where we went, generally coastally. But also in the country, we had a lot of university towns that were very popular. But it's because of the public radio.
Well, it's interesting. Mark Russell, similarly, for years, would do an annual show out of Buffalo, NPR, and that would be broadcast nationally. That was his claim to fame.
Yeah.
That's what launched him. Aside from Shoreham, similar like yours, he's at the Shoreham Hotel. That's his nightly gig.
Right.
And then NPR, similarly, you had your location, which I've been there a couple times way back when. And it's always been a curiosity. The fact that you were part of it. But there is a beginning. I mean, did you grow up in a family of musicians? Was that your mom and dad? Were that part
No,
of it?
mom and dad weren't musicians, but both of them could sing. Didn't do it, except maybe in church.
Yeah.
But the 4 brothers, and we had a very, very charismatic theater director in town, Windsor, Connecticut, where I grew up, Ernie Cirillo, and he had a summer theater. He was also the English teacher and theater director at the high school, and we all kind of went through his track. In the summer, he had this wonderful summer theater, and he had a kind of a charisma about him, and everybody kept kids off the street. So we all basically learned about theater through this summer theater thing that he did. That we all got the bug, and I'm the only one that went into it as a full timer.
But being in the Windsor area, the premier school was the Hart School. Mm-hmm. And was that a goal for you to get into Hart School?
I didn't know what I was going to be. I was a senior in high school, not sure if I was going to be going into film. I had been doing a little bit of film work, or someone said I had a decent voice, maybe I should go into music. So I said, okay. And I think I applied to one school, and that was Hart. And I said, okay, I'll go there. I was wishy-washy. I just kind of fell into it, and kind of found my groove, found the people that I related to, and that's where I went. I'm
going to drop a name of which you may not have any knowledge of, but does the name Tom Oldakowski mean anything to you? He was a percussionist, and Tom, we just came back from a week with him and his wife. He went to Hart School, and he was a percussionist for Radio City Music Hall for years for the Rockettes and all the programs. So, but he went to Hart School, and I'm not frankly sure the timing. He might be a little bit older than you, but not much. But just curious.
I don't know the name, but I'm sure he would know Al Lepak. Excuse me. Al Lepak was the Guru Symphony percussionist guy, also a Windsor guy, and I knew his sons and everything, and trained amazing percussionists. He was at Hart, and was at Hartford Symphony when it was there, and he has lots of people that a lot of his students went on to do Broadway chairs and Goodspeed and Radio and City and Hollywood soundtracks and so forth. So Al really steered these people into the right direction. So he was lucky.
There you go, Tom. When you watch this, Al, you do that. Because I noticed here you studied classical conducting while at Hart. In one little brief vignette, we were in Vienna, and we could go to a simulation where, in fact, they had the Viennese orchestra, and
Oh, really?
you could conduct. And Tom decided he could conduct,
Right.
and they would somehow react to the speed of it all.
No kidding.
And they said, "You're going too fast. You're going too fast." So they gave you immediate feedback. So I'm reading this here, and you clearly have something in common. And when he comes out sometime, and you're here, we'll make sure.
I'd
you
love to
connect.
see him. Yeah.
So you were a conservatory type guy, and ultimately end up in the jazz world.
Yeah.
Was that a normal?
I have no idea where that. Well, do I have no idea where it came from? I just know. I think hearing Al Jarreau when I was in college, studying classical singing and music and conducting and so forth. I heard Al Jarreau and I heard him do Chicory of Spain, putting words to it, and his whole This Time album. And I said, whatever he's doing, I've got to learn how to do that, or at least how to do, some degree of that. And I think he turned me on to the whole idea of jazz. And so at that point, I fell in love with the communication of jazz, just like theater. When you're doing theater right, there's a real communication.
Yeah.
When you're doing jazz right, you were lucky enough to hear these guys last night. The communication, you'll see it, right? You'll see
fun,
it.
yeah.
And it's boom, and they're watching me, and I'm like, and I'm going, watch this, guys. Guess what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And they go, what? And something happens, and we all go, hey, we ended together.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the communication. So that's where I came from, I think. That's the spontaneity and the communication.
You mentioned in the Wikipedia article, which I highly recommend, very impressive, jazz fusion band called Topaz.
Yeah.
Now, was that one of your first kind of major opportunity?
Yeah, that was in Hartford. And yeah, that was a great band. I actually had to audition for them. Great players. Jazz fusion. They would do things like Al Di Meola and Al Jarreau and Spyro Gyra and stuff like that. And they Donald Fagen, trying to find places where they could put a singer in. And of course, Spain, Al Jarreau. I had to audition Spain. But it's all with words, right? I can be calm and desire. I had to literally learn that song to audition for them. And I said, well, if I got to learn that song to audition for them, these guys are my guys.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. We did mainly concerts. We were the kind of band that the other bands would play, finish their dance gigs, and then, playing for dancers and, people dancing, and they'd come see us.
Oh, wow.
So we were the nerds that everybody wanted to hear. We weren't the popular rock and roll band with long hair. We were kind of the jazz nerds, but it was fun.
Last night I was enjoying your scat. And not everybody, unless you're at a certain age, that understand the scat. Because I remember at Chautauqua, towards the end of his career, Mel Torme.
Oh.
Mel Torme was at Chautauqua, met him afterwards, and I got a baseball signed by Mel Torme.
That's cool.
Yeah, but anyway, scat was what he was known for among many people.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the first time really at Chautauqua I'd heard that. Where he really spent a lot of time, and you did it last night.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I try to touch on it. I don't want to go too far because I'm not as good as somebody like that, Ella or
Yeah.
Mel,
Yeah.
Joe Lind. But yeah, it's fun. I think I told you last night, I did all this other stuff to support my jazz habit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the Capitol Steps, I did that all so I could, and theater, regular theater. I also did that. It was fun, but it's also I could do that jazz gig at the end of the night.
You could tell with your enthusiasm throughout, and going from the music to stage. I mean, in one sense, you are putting on a show. I mean, it's all on a stage, but now you're into theater too. Is there a quantum leap to go from, jazz playing with a band and on a stage to just all of a sudden at some point you're on a stage as a theatrical performer, and at some point you're speaking rather than singing?
Yeah, the reason I sent you that, and I know that's too much.
No, it's great. It's great.
Is because I've done so many different things. I've worn a lot of hats, and I'm not. That's not bragging. I don't know if I ever got good at any of it. I guess I got good at all of it. Right.
Yeah.
I got good at all of it, and maybe I'm approaching better than that at some point now that I get to a certain age. But I was always an actor. So even when I was in school for music, I was acting in shows. When I moved to New York City in 84, 85, something like that, 83, I studied acting with the serious schools, the acting studio, and Vivian Madelon and Wynn Hanman and Meisner and people like that. And I took it very, very, very seriously. So I studied heavy technique of acting, which is its own group of rules, a group of skills. And so I've always done that, and it's always been parallel to singing. So I love singing, and I love acting. And so then, therefore, I did some musicals, but I'm not a big musical guy, you know, but I've done them. But I love doing each of these things.
Yeah.
I'd like to do like a detective on Homicide and then go do a jazz gig. That would be a perfect thing for me. And it's kind of actually what I did. Or do Sheer Madness as a actor and then go out and do a jazz gig after. That would be a perfect day for me. So doing them both is kind of what I've always aspired to.
Now, one of your credits, it's long, you have many credits, but Sheer Madness, how did that happen?
That was an audition. Okay, that was a good one. It was Kennedy Center, which of course we all have different feelings
Sure.
about now. And it's still there at the Kennedy Center. And Bob Lorman, who directed me in this one-man show that I did, Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, where I played 9 different characters. This just happened recently. I don't think that's in there. He was a director then, and we're talking back when my daughter was born, 96, 97, just before I joined the Steps. 95, I think. I walked into the Kennedy Center, found my way to the back corridors of it, snuck through security, found the office to the Sheer Madness technical people. Jeton Dobbs was the company manager. Said, "Hey, I'm Mike Thornton, I want to audition for Sheer Madness." And she said, "Man, that's pretty gutsy of you to do that." She goes, "Well, you know what? You look like this one character. I could see you being." She made a call, and the stage manager, Scott Hammond at the time, said, "Yeah, come on over." I went to the stage, and then they auditioned me for the part. That's how I got it. So I kind of did a little bit of, gutsy move there to get where I needed to be.
Well, don't you have to have that in your world? I mean,
Well, no. I had to have the skill.
well,
the
yeah,
talent.
but still they have the chutzpah.
But the thing is, if I could have sent them, how many, same thing with off-Broadway and tours and things. So many people, they get so many. When I was being a producing artistic director up in North Adams and DC and so forth, I'd get hundreds of 8x10s, hundreds and hundreds. And they're all beautiful, interesting people, right? With something coming out in this picture. They pay a lot of money for that, and they have that in their wheelhouse. You go, okay, all right, what do? You look for the one that is the right one for your part. Otherwise, they just go on a pile on your desk and eventually get pushed into the trash bin. It's really difficult to get in front of people, and so that's kind of what I did in that sense. I just went and got myself in front of them.
How was the experience?
The whole thing,
Sheer Madness.
It was great. I had a brand new kid. I think I just had Fosse, who's 28 now. So that's when it happened, when I first started. And it was great. I was exhausted because I had a brand new kid. And, didn't have much sleep. Did it for 2 years. And to have a show where you do performances 8 times a week, making living wage money, I'm saying that with a little L. As far as an equity actor making, union scale, it was great. I loved it. And hour and a half every night, and then the rest of my day would be free. So it was pretty cool. You had to be spot on. If you missed anything, they'd let you know.
Memorization. You see, I'm always amazed by performers, generally, actors certainly, because when you're on stage, you are on stage. You're on. There's no cue cards and it's not take, cut, let's do it again.
Right.
How did you do that? What was your technique?
I just did by way of a story, I just did this Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey. I think Ed saw it. I did a reading of it at the Chautauqua back in June. Previous to that, just a few days before that, I did a short run of it in Westchester, Pennsylvania, called the Uptown Theater. And it's 70 minutes, one guy, me, a couple of props, I think there were a couple of projections, and that was it. And I played 9 characters,
Wow.
men and women. And it's about a young boy, Leonard Pelkey, who you never meet, who's a very flamboyant kid. He might be gay. He doesn't even know what he is yet, but he's certainly very feminine, very flamboyant, and he's 14. And obviously he was picked on, right? This is a South Jersey shore, okay, town. So I had to be New Jersey, which was fun. And it was 70 minutes of all these different characters, and I had a talk back after the show with Bob Lorman, same guy I mentioned from Sheer Madness, who directed me in the Pelkey. And people said, how do you do that? How do you memorize? And I think Bob and I had spoken about that earlier. There's no trick to memorizing, and you'll hear this when you hear actors talk. It's literally getting up and getting a page, looking at the words, and reading the script over and over and over again, which can be kind of redundant, and, but you're learning more every time you read it, and getting a page, working it out, closing your eyes, getting back to it only when you really, really are lost. Get back to it, doing that over and over again, over and over again. It's the work. There's no skill. There's no. I'm not a separate person that can do that, and you can't, or something.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
think that, but that's not the case. That's the work. The art comes after you have the lines. So when I turn into, Gloria, and she talks like this, you think they mind if I smoke? She smokes too much, and she's a lady with a high-haired redhead, Oh, God, she's in the morgue. She says, oh, jeez, this place, they say the lighting depletes your energy, not to mention your will to live, this kind of thing. When I become that woman, it's all of a sudden I'm that woman, she's just, oh, he was amazing, he was special at it. That's not me, but I find something in me that says, this is this woman, and it turns out that what she says to you is so profound coming out of this smokes too much, high-haired, redhead, 70-year-old lady.
Yeah.
That comes from after the lines are learned. So the lines, it's hard, but it's not the hardest part.
What's a normal time frame when somebody decides they're going to do a production, then they're going to go out and cast it, and then they're going to do the play read, and then the memorization? I mean, what's a timeline? I mean, you're confronting that with the upcoming, with this, so What's a Wonderful Life?
I did, yeah. Well, we're doing Christmas Carol here at the Jackson Center.
Yeah.
And we're doing it, so I'll give you what the timeline is. We're using 6 actors, which, as you probably know from knowing the story, the Dickens story, that's pretty small.
Yeah.
Because there's all the kids and the Cratchit family and the Fred and his party, his nephew, God bless you, uncle, and bah humbug, and a lot of people. We're doing it with 6, so we're cutting it. So that's part of it. But the timeline, we're casting now. We've cast the show, minus one part we're working on. We're having a reading on Monday at my house, just a table read, they call it. Sit down with the scripts, and you just read through it. And Stephen Stout's my co-director, my cohort, and he's playing Marley and other things. I'm playing Scrooge. And I wasn't going to play Scrooge. I said, let's get Ron Orbach, who did last year,
Yeah.
He said, no, man, you should do Scrooge. I said, really? I don't see myself. He said, yeah, man, it's got to be you. I said, okay. We're starting rehearsals November 9th or 10th. So we'll have a month, minus a lot of this Thanksgiving week, basically, to do 3, 4, 5 rehearsals a week, mostly evenings and weekends. And then the show goes up December 11th. So, and we do 2 weekends of it. So there it is. It's just getting it all done in about a month.
And then, of course, with that's got the benefit. It's somewhat of it's a read in the sense that they have the script, but they still have to.
Not this one.
No, really, they're
No,
going to
no,
memorize
this-
it.
No, this isn't that.
Oh, really?
This is costumes, lighting,
Oh my
set.
gosh. Oh my God. Good for you.
It's not a radio play.
Yeah.
No, this is the real thing. Yeah.
Tremendous.
There will be some narration.
Sure.
So the way this play happens is each actor at some point goes to the narrating podium or whatever, to the table with the, and says, and then Scrooge did this or that. But the ghosts, the spirits, they'll all be real. We probably won't fly anyone because I don't think we have the word, I don't think we can do that here. But it's going to be a fully staged play.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So the new lights that they're getting here,
Yeah.
which is kind of amazing, they'll really come in handy.
Probably a good opportunity, a segue to having read much about opportunity to find a place, buy a place in Chautauqua County with a certain vision you and your wife have
Yeah.
about the arts and this community.
Yeah.
And can you articulate that?
Sort of the process, or the.
Well, not the process. You're here and you're looking at this community and you're saying, well, there's opportunity. There's some actors floating around. And it's somewhat of a desert. I mean, in the sense that there's not a lot of certainly live activity here.
Right. I have a real affinity for post-industrial towns. Hartford, North Adams, where I did the Mohawk Theater. Post-industrial towns. Sprague Electric, GE, which we know a lot about here, and places like that. I kind of fell in love with North Adams. I took this old Art Deco place and I made it into a live theater with New York actors and everything. I love the idea of getting a community that is not already there, completely there, and helping it. And that's what I'm doing here. So when I saw the opportunity in Jamestown, and the opportunity came out in ways that Stevens, Stout and Kendall and meeting people like David Niles here and meeting people like Ed, and some of the theater people here, of which there aren't a lot. There's community theater, which is awesome. But as far as professional theater, it doesn't exist except for a little bit in the summer with the Chautauqua. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity for me. It's sort of a place where I can take my vision, and start over a little bit again. I wonder if I'm too old, but apparently I'm not because I'm doing it. And say, this is what I want to do, and have people say, okay. In DC, it's a lot more difficult than that. I did it there, I've done it elsewhere, but in DC, it's very difficult because it's a real, conglomerate of all these places and all these theaters. There's hundreds of them.
Yeah, you're one of many.
One of many. Here, they're looking for it. I'm talking to some people about maybe creating a Riverfest in the fall at some point. I hear we have an endangered turtle there, this turtle, the softback turtle, whatever it's called. I said, that'd be a great name, not softback turtle, but figure something out. Down there where they have behind the museum, right?
Yeah, it's a
beautiful spot.
It's a great spot.
And I'm thinking about that, maybe we'll talk. I'm thinking about bringing back the jazz festival at the hotel, Chautauqua.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Josh over there. So I have the ability to do that stuff. I've done that stuff. I've been a director of a festival. I put together festivals before, and I don't know if I want to take that on, but I'm thinking about it. Yeah. So to me, this is a land of opportunity. I guess I'll leave it there.
Well, we'll talk offline about maybe some other opportunities. Your wife, Cecilia, you kind of mentioned her, and she's a co-created and produced by Cecilia Fex, an attorney.
Yeah.
By the way, what did she do in her prior life as an attorney, being a fellow attorney?
Well, Fex is a Swedish name, starting from the beginning there, and she was born in Stockholm.
Ah,
She, her dad was with the NIH and did ear stuff, oral stuff, and
Yeah.
you know, and whatever that's called, got a long name.
yeah, it does.
And she, they immigrated to somewhere in Indiana, the Australia. That's where she learned English, and then Indiana, and then they came to Bethesda, NIH, and she grew up in basically in D.C. after she was 8 or 9 years old. She was a nurse first, an RN, I guess that's the higher one, and did critical care. I don't know if you saw Lorenzo's Oil, that movie. It was a movie about a kid who had this debilitating disease. She took care of Lorenzo. She comes to mind with her nursing at some point. And then she didn't feel good about the way she was being treated at this hospital she was at. So she said, well, heck with it, I'm going to become a lawyer then. So she got herself into Harvard, was classmates with Barack, you know, contemporaries, you know, been to the Oval Office and all that. Was a latecomer, as Barack was to Harvard. And then she had her own, she was a partner in a firm doing rails and trails, basically suing the Fed for takings and reselling.
Yep.
So she's, you know, very much on the liberal side, but she was at this point, she was kind of, you know, even though we love having the old railroads with people running and stuff, if they were taken in the first place or taken very, very little money and then resold for something that's not great if the landowners aren't getting what they, you know, deserve. So that was her thing, a real niche, and she had a really nice niche in that, and just retired from that last couple of years.
And hanging with you.
She's hanging with me. I'm a lucky guy.
You are.
I'm a lucky guy. She's my biggest fan, which is incredible.
Is she musical by background? Is she any of that?
None of it. I think that's why it's so magical, because she thinks what I do is magic.
Yeah.
Because how could anyone do that? When we had our first date, we're second spouses. Had our first date 14 years ago. She came to see a Capitol Steps show, and I was flabbergasted. I couldn't talk. Just she's so beautiful, and I just couldn't. And she was the same way. But I said, "Well, why are you like that?" I'm just. And she said, "I'm nervous for you." I said, "Wait, what?" "I'm nervous for you. You're going to go in front of all those people." I said, "Yeah, that's what I do. I'm an extrovert. This is what I do." But she had to sit down and have a couple glasses of wine, which she generally didn't do on first dates, and watch the show. And she was probably nervous the whole time. She's just that kind of person.
Yeah.
She's an empath, and she's an incredible fan of what I do. Which I'll tell you what, no matter what kind of egos you think we actors and singers have, it's always good to know that somebody's really there for you.
Yeah.
And she is. She's great.
She was there last night.
Yep.
She was there last night, rooting you on. As you knew you were coming here today,
Yeah.
and maybe had talked to other people who Ron Orbach. I did like 2.5 hours with Ron. His whole life story.
Wow.
He really loved it. I think he loved it. Kept going.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah,
I'm sure he did.
And so, is there questions you're kind of anticipating that I'm going to kind of bring up and say, Greg, come on, ask me this one, you know?
I don't know. I mean, I've been through. Like I said, I by my own choice, I've worn a lot of different hats. Not because I had to. Somebody didn't kick me out and say, you know, was doing okay in acting. I was making a living. I was doing okay as a director, artistic director of 3 or 4 different places. I did okay doing that. Jazz singing, what can I tell you? There aren't many rich male jazz singers out there, let's put it that way. And I was never a rock and roll singer. And I did American Songbook. I did songs that are 180 years old, the songs I love. Gershwin and stuff like that, Duke Ellington and, you know, whatever. So I didn't make a lot of money doing that. I just followed what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I think you're kind of covering that. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there are things I've done, but...
Well, I got to ask one specific question. You were one of the, we're talking back to Capitol Steps where we started, and you became known for your impersonations of presidents from Reagan to Trump.
Yeah.
How does one, do you watch television? Do you watch movies, videos, YouTube to kind of get the inflection? Because people know right away whether you're not getting it or not.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a great impressionist. I just kind of gave a flavor to things. You know, Clinton had. I was just talking to Steven on the phone, my cohort of the Christmas Carol, about wigs because we're going to need a lot of wigs. I said I got a couple of old Clinton wigs, and he says, "What are you talking about?" And then he realized, oh right, Capitol Steps. So I still got those. Put on the wig, put on the sunglasses that he wore when he played the saxophone,
Yeah.
which is famous for. So so you didn't have to have the eyes.
Yeah.
The wig, the eyes. How you doing? Hey. And how did you get that? Well, he's a little bit of Elvis. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. But then make him constipated. Well, thank you very much. And there's Bill. How you doing? Hey, how are you? And he'd go out and he'd see he says, hi there, I'm Bill. Hey, how you doing? You know, talking to the girl in the front.
Yeah.
So right away, you know, and George Sr., you know, be kind of like a little bit of John Wayne, you know, little John Wayne. Not gonna go there, you know, a little bit of it's not prudent, you know, get a little bit of that. W. Bush kind of had that little bit of, well, I guess, you know, fool me once, fool me twice, you know, kind of had that lost kind of little chuckly thing going on. You get a little bit of the feel, and then you try to impart your little pieces with them, and that's it.
Did you ever do an impersonation and the person you impersonated was in the audience?
Oh yeah, yeah, certainly Clinton. We were backstage at the Warner Theater for a fundraiser for Gore, and there's James. I was starstruck, and it wasn't by Clinton and Hillary backstage because we'd see them around now and then, not a lot, but James Taylor.
Oh my God.
Not Cat Stevens, Neil Young.
Yeah.
You know, people like that were backstage with us, waiting for our do 5 minutes each, with like guys like James Taylor and Neil Young and then Bill Clinton. So I did it for Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do this version of Who's On First.
Yeah.
And we would try to get, like if Tom Brokaw or somebody was in the audience, we'd have him come and, well, it depends on what you mean by there. If then, you know, and he'd read the straight man, and so yeah, sometimes they'd be in the audience.
Did you ever bring anybody up? I know, like Saturday Night Live, all of a sudden they'll bring up a guest star or somebody. They'll just kind of work them in.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah, we do that. We do that with, you know, the one I just mentioned, Who's On First. That could be a celebrity, whoever's in the. It could be, I don't know, whoever's in. Usually be a news person, you know, that we'd all know, Brokaw or someone like that. Some of the other guys. We never had a president do that, but we performed for presidents.
Yeah.
And who was a great one? Was Cooper, the Surgeon General, who kind of looked like
Yeah.
Kentucky Fried. Was it Cooper? Anyway,
We had to look.
Stuck with names. But he was a big fan of the Capitol Steps, and he'd come up whenever we, you know, were doing something. We do a lot of conventions.
Yeah.
Which wasn't our favorite part of the job, but it was made the gravy. The public shows were the fun part. The ones where there's roast beef involved, not so fun, but it was still okay. And very often in those, you'd have someone that was notable. We'd get them up to do something if we could.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So we are really looking forward to Mike Thornton 2025 and beyond in our area.
Thank you.
I think this is very exciting to have a man of your background and talents, and I'm sure you're going to be embraced by the community if you haven't been already. But
thank you.
They're looking
nice
for
of
that.
you. We've gotten great press for when we did This Wonderful Life, and people got to know us. I think we had 4 sold-out shows basically.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So I think we're off to a good start.
Well, thank you. Maybe the next time we'll interview your wife.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
She's the best.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. This
Thank
has been
you.
terrific.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Yep.